Good evening. How's your day? Good evening. How's your day?
My day was good.
Good. Okay. So, right now it's the actual interview, okay? So we'll be asking a couple of questions, and feel free to say anything you'd like to say, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, what is your full name?
I'm sorry, my hearing is not quite as good as it should be. Your question again?
What is your name? Your
Oh,
full
my
name.
Okay, I'm Carl Wagner.
Okay, thank you. And when were you born?
October 9, 1930.
Thank you. And where were you born exactly?
I was born in Alexander County, about 20 miles east of here.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I lived there until I was 18, went to college, and from college I went into service, and so I've never lived back there full time since. You know, I visited, my parents were there, my sister was there, but I have not been back living in that home since 1948.
And you did a Korean service?
I went into service in 1952.
19.
Korean service.
Korean service. Were you actually at Korea?
I did not get to Korea. I was on board a ship headed for Korea when the truce was signed. I landed in Japan 2 days after the truce was signed. They had not set up a rotation system to put troops in to replace the ones that were there. So I got stationed in Japan, and I served my service overseas in Japan, but not Korea.
Oh, do you have any experiences there?
I had quite a few experiences there.
Really? Like, did you have... what were some of the good ones that you had?
Some of the good ones. We were in ski training, and I had never been on a pair of skis in my life. But in northern Japan, in the city of Sapporo, long before you were born, the Winter Olympics were held in the city of Sapporo. And I say this to say that I was in an area that was winter. We had, in an extreme, well, let's go back and tell you a little of my experience. I was in the infantry. I was a officer, went in as a second lieutenant. We were in the 1st Cavalry Division, the one with the big horse patch. The 1st Cavalry Division had been in Japan, in Korea, had got shot up bad when the Chinese came across, and it was pulled back into Japan to rebuild. When the truce was signed, it was for a 90-day truce. So at the end of 90 days, either side was free to resume hostility. That was the agreement of the truce. So they took our division, the 1st Cavalry Division, put it on amphibious ships, and put us out into the Sea of Japan off the coast of North Korea. And we were to invade North Korea if hostility started. During the time we were out there, we did amphibious landings on the coast of Japan. Of course, the North Koreans knew we were out there. It was a political threat. You know, that was same thing we do in Saudi Arabia. You know, we have ships off the coast of Iran. We have into this type situation. 1st of November, we came back into the Japanese port to go back to where we were. We came into the post, and some of the guys in my outfit had been there the winter before. And as all military people do, they're apt to exaggerate. And when we got on board, got off the ship and on the trucks and so forth and pulled into camp, there were 12-foot 2x4s painted with black-orange stripes. And I said to one of the fellows, "What are those for?" He said, "That's so they can find the road when it snows, so they can plow out the road." I said, "No, you're kidding me." But before the winter was over, we had 8 feet of snow on the ground.
Wow.
We had 3 feet of packed snow, and then we had a 3-day blizzard, just white out. Dropped 5 more feet on top of the 3 feet that was already there. We had 8 feet of snow, so we were in snow country, and we took ski training all winter long. That was what we were there for. And of course, the ski training primarily was preparation for Russia. Russia was, of course, our big threat in 1952. And so they were trying to train as many troops as they could for winter conditions and for ski training. So we took ski training for the winter.
Wow. That seems really cool. Do you have any bad experiences, if you want to talk about it?
Didn't any bad experiences I have, and I tell this story more often than I should. I measure every day against one of the days out on that ship, because I say that's the worst day of my life. We, as I said, were pulling practice amphibious landings. We had been out there and we were scheduled to do a practice landing one day, and the weather was somewhat bad, and they called it off. And the next day was better, and so we got into the little landing craft boats and made the trip in, and we dug foxholes and we went through this thing, and all of our gear got wet and soggy, and and you got back on board the ship, and next day was going to be, quote, even though it was a practice, they said, okay, before we do an assault, we always do a practice, and that was the practice. Now tomorrow morning is going to be the assault, not a live fire assault, but on the coast of Japan. Got up the next morning, it was raining, it was blowing, it was howling, and we all thought they'll call it off. They said, no, you don't ever call off the real thing. You might call off for practice, don't call it the real thing. We're going. So these little landing craft down there were up beside the ship, and the waves, and they were 10-foot waves, and you went over the side with all your gear climbing down the net into this landing craft. And of course, the trick was, how are you going to decide when you're going to let go of the net and go to the landing craft, because it's up here and then it's here. So you try to time the thing so that you drop into the landing craft without too big a crash. And I always get seasick. Everybody in this landing craft got seasick. We were out there circling. We were so far out we could not see the beach. We were 6 miles off the beach. We were completely over the horizon. It was stormy. It was up and down. Everybody was sick, throwing up. And we were circling. We were circling until everybody else got loaded so we could go in as formation. And finally we got the word that a Navy coxswain was running the landing craft. We got the word that we were ready to head for shore. And we headed. I was sick, but I wasn't the sickest one on board. I was sick. Somewhere I had one of these old-fashioned World War II walkie-talkies. I could hear somebody, but nobody could hear me. I couldn't raise anybody on the thing. I thought I couldn't get anybody. The coxswain called me back, said the pumps have quit working, and we're going to sink. I said, let it sink. I mean, I'm sick, I'm wet, I've got a life jacket, let it sink. No, he said, let's don't do that. He said, let's get everybody in the rear, get the nose up. I'll make a run for the beach. So he took off, broke formation, and headed for the beach. He got himself out there, dropped the front end because he had gone as far as he could go. But what he'd done was hit a sandbar. When we went out the front, we were in deep water, floundering around with our helmets and rifles, trying to make the way to the shore. We got everybody on shore, sick, soggy wet, raining, miserable as it could be. We were there for a few hours, dug foxholes, whatever. I always said if there's anybody up there shooting at us, it just have been slaughter. We weren't ready to fight. It got a little better. So they said it was over. They were going to come in and pick us up, take us back. Well, there was one guy in my outfit that was so sick that he had to be carried onto the landing craft. I said, there's no way he can go up the net. I don't think I can go up the net. I said to myself, they're going to have to lower a set of steps, which they call a ladder. They're going to have to lower a set of steps down, and the medics are going to have to come down and get this guy in a litter and take him up. When they do that, I'm going up with him. I'm the ranking person in this ship. I'm going to go up with him. I'm not going to try to climb the net. But there was a Army major on board the ship that had never left the ship. And when he saw me throw my leg across to come up the ladder, he said, no, can't come up the ladder. Got to come up. It was about 40 feet, about 4 stories up this thing. And I made it, or I wouldn't be here. I mean, if I fell off down that thing, but it was a miserable day. As I say, the only good thing about it was there wasn't anybody out there shooting at me. That's the only thing good that happened that day.
Wow. Do you think about that a lot?
Well, not except when I start thinking about a miserable day somewhere, and I think, well, it's not as bad as that one. It's not as bad as that one.
And you told us about the Great Depression. How?
Okay, the Depression. Of course, the Depression started in, I guess the official was October of 29 with the stock market crash. The stock market, here again, I don't know how much you have been involved in study of that part of the history, but the 20s were a boom day. World War I had ended in 1919. The 20s were high prosperity. Everybody thought, hey, everybody can get rich, everybody could, and so they overspent. And the businesses overspent, investors in the stock market had overspent. They had a lot of money out there. There was a lot of what we would today call leveraging. Individuals who bought stock that they didn't have money enough to pay for. So they mortgaged their house or their farm or their business, and they bought more than they could afford, thinking that stock market would keep going up, and they'd make money and they'd sell out and they'd be ahead. And the bubble burst, and suddenly the nation was in a very, very severe depression. There were individuals, not in large numbers, but there were individuals who jumped out of tall buildings to commit suicide. They were, it was a real disaster. Factories shut down. There was no unemployment, which we have today. Nobody got unemployment checks. Nobody had Social Security. Nobody had Medicare. Most folks didn't have health insurance. It got rough. One story that I tell, and this is one that comes from my older sister, not myself, because it happened when I was just 6 months old. But in 1931, I had an uncle that died, and the funeral was going to be 14 miles away. My daddy decided there wasn't enough gas in the car. That he had this 31, he had a 26 Model T model, and of course they didn't have gas gauges. You had to stick a stick down in to see if you had any gas. So this because cars weren't built with gas gauges. He decided he didn't have enough gas to get there and back. He didn't have any money. We had some farm produce. We had eggs. but he couldn't take the eggs to the store and sell them. They wouldn't give him money for them. But he did know a place that would take eggs on trade. So he gathered up enough eggs to go to a store that would let him buy gas with the eggs. If they had a little cash, they didn't want to give up the cash. I mean, this was, and as I said to you, as the years went along, it was very, very slow getting better. During some of that time, we had adult males who came to work on the farm for $1 a week and room and board because they didn't have any other place to go. They was it was. So, as I said to you then, and thought about it since, these are far from being the worst of times, and it will get better. We're going to see, I think we're already seeing things turn. You know, the stock market has gotten back now to where it was 5-6 years ago. There's more construction taking place. We went to the funeral today in the Evans Funeral Home, a member of our church. And you go through the construction up here on 321, and you say, well, you know, this construction project is a big mess, but it's giving people a lot of work. Yeah. One of the things that was an effort to improve the situation with the Depression years was that the government started a lot of construction projects, and they had initials for them. One was called WPA, and that WPA stood for Works Progress Administration. But a lot of folks nicknamed it We Piddle About. WPA. WPA did a lot of construction. When I went to state in '48, I was in a dormitory that had a plaque on the side of it built by WPA. But on the other hand, in a rural area where we lived, the WPA quite often was out with a pick and shovel cleaning out road ditches and culverts and this sort of thing, just to give them a little bit of income. There was a project up here in Collinsville. Have you ever been to Collinsville?
Yeah. Okay,
just beyond Collinsville in the 30s, there was a camp called CCC, the Conservation Civilian Conservation Corps. CCC took individuals who were 16, 17, 18 years old and used them to do conservation projects in government land. They worked in the Park Service, they built trails, they built bridges, they built shelters. And they were there because they got a place to sleep and a place to eat and a little bit of pay. But not having unemployment, what they did was try to have works projects. And the CCC and the WPA and a few other of those initial things went on during the 30s to try to keep people alive. And quite truthfully, to keep folks from rioting. You know, if people get hungry enough, then they're going to try to find a solution to their problems.
How does the Great Depression affect you? Like how you lived back then till now?
Okay. I was raised in a family that was better off than a lot of our neighbors. My mother had some education. My mother had taught school. The fact is, in 2021, school year 2021, she taught at Oak Hill here in Caldwell County. She was raised in Algonquin County, but she had a relative, and she taught school there. She taught school in Hickory a few years. She strongly wanted us kids to go on to school. My grandfather, and it was in my grandfather's house that we lived in. He had built this house in the 1880s. He had been a school teacher. He had been Register of Deeds of Alexander County. He was educated. And if I were telling stories, I'm amazed. I never knew him. He died when I was 6 months old. But I always saw an awfully lot of his handiwork in the house that he built and the farm that we lived on. He had lost his wife and remarried and lost that wife after only a year or two. And my mother was the youngest of the children, and as the children went on and as his health became bad, he wanted somebody to be there and take care of him in his old age. Just say there was no Social Security, no. And so he talked to all of the kids about the possibility of living there. My mother and father had been married only a short time. They hadn't established a home yet, so they came back there and they inherited the house and part of the land, and they bought some additional land and they farmed there. But he and my parents believed that you could take care of yourself, you could do it yourself, and you did it without wasting anything. And so, I'll tell you this story. When I went off to college in 48, and of course I had a roommate, and he was from just as far east as you can go, down on the Sound. And his parents had more money, had a small business. And before long he said to me, "You're stingy. You know, you're stingy." And I said, "I came by it honest." I said, "My daddy was in World War I, and he, coming home from service in 1919, a lot of the folks on the ship in his outfit were from the local area that had been drafted together, and he knew that quite a few of them. And on the ship, an individual borrowed a dime from him to buy some oranges. And he knew the guy. The guy lived in Hickory. My daddy lived in Catawba County. And he borrowed a dime. And the fellow never paid that dime back. And I said, my dad had never forgotten it. This was 48, and so this had been better than 20 years, and 30 years. And he said, "Oh, you know he forgot it." I said, "No, he hadn't forgotten it. But when I go home this next weekend, you won't be there, but I'll mention to him, just see what he says." So I said to my daddy at some point when I was home, I said, "You remember that guy in service you loaned a dime to for buying oranges on the ship?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I saw him in Hickory Saturday and he didn't even mention it." Now, keep it. They hadn't been paid for 3 months. They were in the Army, but for some reason they hadn't been paid for 3 months. They were making $21 a month. That dime, I don't know what it would translate to today, but certainly a $10 bill. You know, it was much more money than you would think. But I'm saying that I was raised this way. And so, to a large extent, I still practice this. Again, most folks won't go along with this policy. But for many years, I said, I've never bought a new car, and I've never made a car payment. I can still say I've never made a car payment. I bought one new car, but I paid cash for it. I've never made a car payment because I credit this to the Depression. You see, my parents believed that it was a disgrace to be in debt. If you owed somebody money, you were ashamed of it. My daddy had bought some land, and he didn't have enough to pay for it all at the time he bought it. But he wasn't proud of the fact. And as soon as he possibly could, he paid off the rest of it. And of course, when I bought this house, I had a mortgage too. I'm not saying I never had a mortgage, but the house is the only thing I've ever borrowed money for. And I credit it or blame it, whichever way you want to say it. I blame it on the Depression. That having been raised with a family in which you had to hold on to what you had and be careful with it. It's made a difference.
Wow. And what, you said your father was at World War II. What position was he?
My father?
Yes.
Excuse me just a minute. I've got something I'll show you. Okay, my father was in World War I, and this was an overcoat button.
Wow.
With a bullet hole in it. He says that they were, and he was in the infantry, and they were advancing on a hill and came under sniper fire, and he went belly down behind a bush.
Yeah. And
while he was behind that bush, he knew a bullet cut a leaf off the bush that the guy shot through the bush. The sniper did. He had his overcoat. This was in November, and he had a pack, and he had his overcoat on top of his pack. And the next time he put his overcoat on, he realized that a bullet had passed through the button. Not while he was wearing the overcoat, but while the overcoat was in his pack on his back limb. Behind that, he suspected it was the same bullet that he saw come through there. But this was in World War I. I was in the Korean service. I wasn't in World War II. I had a brother that caught the tail end of World War II. That was a little older than I was. And I went in. And so that was me in the service in 52 to 54.
And like, what position were you?
I was an infantry combat platoon leader. That means that, well, I had a group that if it were up to full strength, it was about 40 individuals, but usually you had about 30. And I was in the weapons platoon, which meant that we had a squad of 9, if they were full strength, 9 individuals as machine gunners. They would have about 3 machine guns, and they'd have ammo carriers and so forth. We had a squad of 60 millimeter mortars. The mortars would be huge. If you drop a shell down, and when it hits the bottom of it, you're looking at it, you really don't know what a mortar is. A mortar is the 30 millimeter, 60 millimeter is the smallest one. Then there's an 81, and then there's a 4.2. But it gives the frontline infantryman something they can carry that throws a rather large explosive charge. And so, in order to tell you more than you want to know, an artillery piece fires lower than 45 degrees. Of course, you always elevate it so that it goes a distance. But it fires less than 45, therefore it has recoil back. A mortar always fires above 45 degrees. It fires high so that the recoil goes into the ground. so that you don't have to have a lot of carriage and weight to hold it. It has a plate that sits here. And so we had a 60 millimeters, about like so. And you would drop a shell down it, and it had a firing pin set in the bottom of it. You didn't have a trigger. When you put it up here and you turned it loose, when it hit the bottom, it fired, and it went up and over and down and exploded. So we had a machine gun crew, we had a mortar crew, and we had what we call a bazooka. This was a self-propelled rocket. Today, the thing that the military uses, and the shoulder-fired rocket that you see on, we had a different version of this, but it was a bazooka. So I had a platoon of about 30 to 40 Indian guys with weapons. The rest of the company were riflemen. We were in a rifle company. There were 3 platoons of 40 men or so who were riflemen. And then there was a weapons platoon that went with them in support of them, and I was in charge of the weapons platoon.
Did you have any injuries or any scars from the war? Were you ever injured?
I had a ski injury. We were, as I say, I did not go into combat. Didn't get into Korea. But we were constantly doing ski training. And on one occasion there in February, we had my group was supposed to be in charge of a training exercise for a larger group. And so we were on a hill bigger than this one here, and we were going to demonstrate an attack on a hill over there. And so we were going to ski down the hill, drop our skis, go on foot up the hill, make a charge up the hill. And we had an audience, a military audience there. And we were going down the hill double file. And a guy on my right and slightly ahead of me had a weapon known as a Browning automatic rifle, BAR. Most of the rifles that we fired were semi-automatic, you pull the trigger, but this one it had a 20-round magazine, and it would fire as long as you held the trigger. It was a little bigger, and it had a flash hider on the end, a piece of metal that came out the head of the barrel and was very thin. And he lost his ski footing and fell in front of me. And when he fell, I was almost as close as me to you. I mean, I had very little time to react. I knew I couldn't clear him any other way. I attempted to roll over him to just keep my skis down and go over him. But his flash hider caught me under the knee, across the knee, and made a cut there that I got stitches in, and has got a scar and a knot there where I hit that flash hider.
Wow. And have you seen any of your friends having any injuries?
I had a corporal, Montalvo was his name. He was Puerto Rican, and he was a great guy. He was energetic, he was loyal, he was a hard worker. And again, we were out on a ski trail, and the mountains in Japan. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains here, and I've been told that these are old mountains. And I said, how can you tell they're old mountains? I mean, the mountain's a mountain. How do you know this is an old mountain? Well, these are old mountains. Nobody explained to me why. But when I got to Japan, I realized why they classify these as old mountains. These are old mountains because they have eroded so much that they're rounded off. Japan has lots of sharp mountains. Comes right up to a peak and drops off into the sea and this sort of thing. They're much more of a volcanic origin, and the volcanoes are pushed up, and we were on one of these ridges, and the ridge had just a narrow ridge, and we were skiing with the ridge but downhill, and the first guys were running in powder snow, but the more people that ran this trail, the more packed and slick and faster it got. And the truth was, the skis we had were cross-country skis. They weren't downhill skis, so you didn't have the control you really have in today's downhill skis. They were cross-country skis. So I wasn't at the very front, but I was close to front, and I was ahead of Montalvo. But the guy in front of Montalvo fell, and in order to avoid him, Montalvo turned off the trail, and down the side of this mountain he went, much steeper, much sharper, and he hit a tree. A limb broke off, it dug into his leg. He had a nasty place. We had to get him evacuated out with what we called a weasel. A weasel was a tracked, we wouldn't call it a snowmobile, it had two tracks, but it was a personnel carrier that was tracked to travel in the snow, and we had to get, he probably was the worst injury that I saw was this. I saw several cases of frostbite in this situation. Guys that would, their ears would get frozen and frostbit and this sort of thing.
Wow. You experienced a lot there. And you said on the pre-interview your brother was in the World War?
I'm sorry?
You said in the pre-interview that your brother was in the war too?
Well, there again, my brother was 2.5 years older than I was. And again, to fill you in a little bit, North Carolina had a 11-year graduation. You went 7 years to elementary school, 4 years to high school, and you graduated after 11 years. In somewhere, can't give you the exact year, but somewhere along about 42, they decided that they would put in an 8th grade that was not high school, and high school would be 9 through 12 as it is today. So they inserted an 8th grade. My brother finished at 11 years, so he was 17. 18 was the draft age. Everybody would be drafted if you were anything close to physically fit. So a lot of individuals, including my brother, looked around for some special program that you might get into in service, Air Force, Navy, or otherwise. And someone made him aware of an engineering program that if he were to sign up for this program now, and like everything else, it had initials. It was called ASTRP, Army Specialized Reserve Training Program. If he signed up for this, they would send him to an engineering college until he turned 18. When he turned 18, he would finish that quarter, and then they would take him into the Army Engineers. So he did this, and they sent him over to North Georgia State College, which is in Dahlonega. And his birthday was in April, so he finished a full year of engineering training. And he went into service then in June of 45. And about this time, Germany surrendered. Japan was still fighting. The Japanese War went on to August sometime, and the nuclear bombs were dropped and the war ended, and he had not yet been sent overseas. So he was in the Army, but he was still in the States. And they had a lot of people. They were getting folks out of service and so forth. And but they were also aware that Korea was a place they needed to keep occupied. They were sending troops into Korea, and they gave him a choice. He could take a discharge, or he could go and serve another year or so in Korea. And so he took the discharge. And he got some GI at the time, and he went on into engineering and did this. The Korean War came along several years later, and the Army, being what they are, decided that he wasn't a veteran. He'd been in service, he got GI Bill, he went to college on a GI Bill, but they said, no, we're going to draft you again. So they drafted him for the Korean service. But by this time, he was a college graduate engineer and was working for the state of North Carolina Highway Department. And so he went back into the engineers, and they sent him to France with the Army engineers. We still had a lot of occupation troops in Europe from World War II. And so he went into an engineering company, and even though he went in as a private, and I'll tell you why he went in as a private and I went in as an officer, but he went in as a private, but he had the highest degree engineering-wise of anybody in the outfit. So they built big warehouse freezer, food freezers, plants, and so forth, this type of thing. And so he spent his 2 years in Europe during the Korean War instead of going. The reason he went in as a private and I went in as a lieutenant was ROTC. ROTC is Reserve Officer Training Program. And when I went into the state was a land grant college. And land grant means that way back in the 1800s, the federal government, in order to try to get states to establish what they called agricultural and mechanical, AMT. You know, some individuals, we still talk about Texas A&T. Okay, A&M. Okay, we have A&T as a black college in North Carolina, predominantly black. It was all black for one time. They gave land as a land grant to a state to establish a university. There wasn't a lot of land in North Carolina, so North Carolina got land out in Oklahoma somewhere so they could sell. But with this, they established North Carolina State and A&T in Greensboro. But the government put stipulations on it. And one of the stipulations was that anyone who was not a veteran had to take military training for 2 years. So the first 2 years I was at state, I had to take ROTC, military training with it. At the end of the 2 years, I had a choice of continuing in advanced ROTC, or I could drop out. If I signed up for advanced ROTC, that meant that I would have to serve a minimum of 2 years in service and another 4 to 6 years in reserve following my there. But there again, everybody being drafted, you know, the Korean War, you had a universal draft. When I say everybody, not everybody, but a very high percentage of the males were getting drafted. And so I decided that if I were going to be in college and had 2 years of military training already, I'd take the other 2 and I would go in as an officer. So I did that. My brother went to NC State, but he was a veteran, you see, when he went there, so he didn't have to take ROTC. So he didn't get the officer's training. So he went back in as a private, but he did okay. No problem there either.
Wow. Okay. Did you have... in the pre-interview, you said your mother wanted college-bound kids. How do you think she was raised to make her think that?
How do I think?
she was raised to make her think that? Because I know you told me that she had a good education.
Okay. I started to tell you this earlier and I got diverted. My mother's grandfather, it was my grandfather's father, was a Civil War soldier. And he was stationed in Virginia, and of course there was a lot of fighting going on in Virginia, and he got wounded. But he survived the wound, and they let him come home for a few months to recover from the wound, but he went back into service. And at some point later in the war, he was captured and was imprisoned at Elmira, New York. And of course, prisons in the Civil War prisons were very unsanitary places. And he got dysentery, extreme diarrhea type situation, and he died in prison. So he never came home. My grandfather, the one that my mother's father, and the one that, as I say, he died when I was 6 months old. He was 5 years old when his dad went off to service. He just did remember him going off to service. He left, my great-grandfather left a widow in Alexander County, really at the foot of a mountain, side of a mountain, a little mountain farm, with 7, 8 or so kids. And I don't know how they made it. I don't know why they didn't starve to death. But she managed to get several of those kids educated. As I say, my granddaddy was a school teacher. He was a register of deeds for the county. He had a far better handwriting. I see his work in the register of deeds it was almost like calligraphy. So what amazes me is not so much that my mother insisted we get an education. It was her grandmother who insisted that her kids get an education in 1865, 70, 75, following the Civil War, when times were really tough for the South, no doubt about it. So how she managed to get, he had several brothers that got enough education that they taught school or held a post office job or other things. So it really amazes me that her father was able to get an education and do what he did, following the death of his dad when he was just a little kid in the Civil War. My mother was the youngest of 9 children, and my grandfather, now he lost, as I told you, he lost his wife when my mother was 4 years old. But he didn't teach school after that, but he taught school before that. But he helped his kids, all of them, get what in that day was considered to be an education. Now, my mother went through high school at that point. This would have been 1917, 18, 19. At that point in North Carolina, if you had finished high school, you could take an exam, and if you passed the exam, you could be a school teacher. You did not have to have college. She taught a year or two with that certification, and then she went to Chapel Hill for a summer school. She never went a full term other than a summer school. She went to summer school, but she was always proud of the fact that she had some summer school. And so for her day and time, she was more educated by far than the other folks around the community. And she certainly wanted all of her kids to go to college, and there was 5 of us, and we all did go to college. The 2 oldest were girls. They went to Norrine. Norrine, because it was nearby, and my daddy sold produce in Hickory. We were sold farm produce. The primary income was the fact that we kept cows and chickens, and we sold milk and butter and eggs and anything else that we might happen to have. If we had extra apples, we sold apples. If we had whatever, if we killed a hog, we sold sausage, this sort of thing. And so he was going to Hickory at least once a week, and my sisters were living off campus. And you talk about stingy. Now, one of my sisters is extremely stingy. She was 4.5 years older than I am, and so she remembers the Depression much better. And I can tell you some of her stingy stories, but they right across the street from the college was a lady who would keep room. Okay, I started to say boarders, but boarders implies that you got a meal. They got a room, and they had kitchen privilege, but not the home's kitchen privilege. Down in a basement, and this basement was a cellar, really. It had a dirt floor, and there was a little kerosene cook stove down there, with just primitive kitchen, and she lived there. The upstairs, the house did not have central heat, and so it had a little heater that every morning in cold weather somebody would have to get up and build a fire to warm up the place a little bit. And so there was three of the girls had upstairs, and one of the girls apparently had a little more money and no desire to get up early and build a fire. So she would give my sister a dime when it was her time to build a fire, she'd give my sister a dime to get up and build a fire. And my sister thought that was not a bad deal, you know. She that dime. Now here again, even in that dime, give you this example. A cold soft drink, a Coke, a Pepsi Cola, was a nickel. So she would get the price of 2 Cokes to build a fire. So whatever you pay for a Coke today, you know, she was getting a little more than you might think. But anyway, that was. But they went to Norrine. My next brother had GI Bill, so things came a little easier to him. I went straight out of high school and did not apply for a scholarship. There were folks who thought I should have, could have. I didn't. I drove a school bus. When I started driving a school bus when I was 16. I got $13.20 a month for driving a school bus. The next year, the salary went up. I was making $20 a month. That was great. But years later, I used this example. I was at South Caldwell, and the guy would always come in the spring of the year to talk to folks about a class ring. And kids from my class would go look at these class rings, and they'd come back and say, he wants $400 for those rings. $450, $425, you know. I said, I know how you feel. I said, my class ring cost $18.75. And they says, I wish it was like that now. I said, it is. I made $20 driving a school bus. I could take a school bus check in, lay it down, and get a ring and a little bit of change. I said, a school bus driver today, driving a month. And we had 2 drivers at that time. Then take a school bus check in and lay it down and get a class ring and a little bit of change. It's not that everything's gone up. It's the price of money. The value of money is the bottom is falling out. That when we talk about what the price was when I was in college or my sister was in college, money was an entirely different thing. The bottom fell out of money. It just doesn't go as far.
You have to have more of it, but you get less. You get more. You get the magnitude. I mean, the price of a gallon of gas, as he told you.
Well, gas, and that'll get me another one of my rants. When I can remember when gasoline was 21 cents a gallon.
Wow.
It's cheaper today than it was then.
What are you going to talk?
21 cents a gallon gas. World War II, we had an OPA, everything had initials, Office Price Administration. Wages were frozen. The average factory worker was making 40 cents an hour. So he had to work a little over a half hour to buy a gallon of gas.
Wow.
Today, folks don't expect to work a half hour to buy a gallon of gas. Gas is cheaper today than it was when it was 21 cents a gallon. In terms of
How long you had to work.
how long you have to work to get it.
That's amazing.
Something to think about, isn't it?
It is. Gas is cheaper, food is cheaper
Yeah.
than it was when I was growing up.
We used to get a hamburger for what, 10 cents?
Uh,
I mean,
Well, when I was in high school, the place across the street to let us go to, hot dogs were a nickel, but a hamburger was 15 cents. But I didn't have a nickel.
I know, I didn't have one either. We didn't. We didn't have money. I used to tell my children when I was teaching, the poorest one you know, the poorest child you know that goes around is so much richer than so many children in so much of the world. Even the one that you think that has no home, he still is richer than there are so many places in the world. And that's something that people don't think about.
It's true. And do you think you would have made your mother proud by the way you're living your life right now?
Tell me again.
Do you think you would have made your mother proud or your parents proud by the way you're living your life right now?
I think so.
Oh yes, I know so.
I think so.
I know so. Yes, he had a wonderful mother, and she would be very proud. She was very proud.
Well, she's referring to the older kids going to school. My younger brother became a chemical engineer, and she wasn't terribly proud of where he put his. He worked for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, and he started smoking, and she never appreciated that.
That's true.
But after he retired from R.J. Reynolds, he has quit smoking. So he doesn't smoke now. But
Did he tell you that there were 5 kids in the family?
Yes.
And all 5 of them graduated from college, and 3 of them have graduate degrees,
I told him that.
and their parents didn't send them money. They didn't have it.
They had to work for it.
Well, but I told her that the one that really amazed me is how my grandfather got an education after Civil War when his dad didn't come home, and the woman lived over there on the side of the mountain in a little farm.
I don't remember that one.
You do remember that. Andrew Jackson Tigg
Okay.
was killed,
Yeah.
died in prison, and left his wife and this bunch of kids over there on the side of Barracks Mountain. And Uncle William taught school, and my granddaddy taught school, and others, and you know, she got those kids educated some way, and I don't know how.
I don't know either.
I really don't know. I'm totally amazed that following the Civil War, she got those kids educated.
Wow. And how or where did you get the money to go to college?
I had $200 when I left home that I had saved from working at a sawmill and driving a school bus. We had, at that time, okay, today colleges generally have an orientation in which they can have parents and kids come in and, you know, and they go through, well, not then. you showed up a week early without your parents, and you had an orientation for the freshman class. My parents took me to Hickory and put me on a bus, and I headed off to Raleigh. I'd been down there once before. My high school agriculture teacher took me down one time when he was going, and I didn't take, but I'd been, and my older brother had been down there. He got out of service and had gone in before I got there, so I had a brother that was going to be there, but he wasn't there for that. But we had met a few orientation groups and classes and so on around campus, and near my dorm was a student supply store. It was more, it didn't sell books and so forth. It more was a sandwich soda shop. And I went in there and they had a sign up, help wanted. And I was with another fellow that I knew, actually a cousin of mine. And I said, I'm going to apply for a job. And he said, I'm going to wait till I get my class schedule because it might conflict with the job. I said, I can always quit the job when I get my schedule. If I have a job, I can quit. But if I wait till these other folks come in and don't have a job, I may not get one. So I applied for the job and I got hired before I met my first class. I made 75 cents an hour. And basically I was a soda fountain operator. We served milkshakes and sandwiches and fountain cokes and so forth. And we had a little bit of school supplies, but say we didn't sell textbooks. You know, we'd sell notebooks, paper, a few things of that sort. And so I worked there, and we literally called the man and his wife who ran it Mom and Pop. This was they went back. And the place was known as Pops that I worked in. And so I worked there before class, after class, until 10 o'clock at night. And I generally worked about 20 hours a week in addition to my college classes. And I had a sister who had finished Lower Rhine and was teaching school. And she didn't have a car. She didn't have a driver's license. She lived in what was known as a teacherage, a large house beside the school that rented a room to teachers. And so I borrowed a little money from her. And I kept a little book of everything I spent. First year in college, it cost me $873 or $93 or some dollars. This was tuition and books and food, and this is what I spent. And I earned most of it. I borrowed a little from my sister. When I finished 4 years, my last year cost me $1,200. And I had borrowed about $600
from Rachel,
from my sister Rachel.
And out of that $600, you bought my engagement ring and wedding ring.
Right. I bought
that came out of that money. Now I don't have it now because my grandson gave it to his bride. I have arthritis and my hands swelled and I couldn't wear my rings anymore. So I gave my rings to my grandson. And so mine.
And this top quarter up in that corner there, that's the grandson and his wife.
Right.
So she's got her rings now.
Yeah, and then that's the granddaughter. Yeah. So she has the rings now. But that was okay. I'm glad.
But no.
I mean, I can't wear them anymore because of my fingers, of arthritis.
My mother would have been proud of and was proud of her kids. Yep.
Yes, she would have. And his daddy too. His daddy was more amazed that they did as well as they did.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, that's Lucy's dad there.
Yeah, my father.
Well, he looks just like you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he looks just like you.
Does he? Good.
Yes, he does.
Good. Daddy was 49 the week I was born. so he was already old. And I had a little bit of a different perspective than he did.
And how long have you been with your wife? How long have you been with your wife?
Oh, how long have we been married?
60 years in May.
Wow, 60 years.
We were married in 53.
Mm-hmm. And have you felt like you lived your life right so far?
I'm gonna leave on that one.
Let's say that I have been fortunate. Health-wise, job opportunity-wise, and so forth, I have been fortunate. Yes.
Wow. And how did you meet your wife? Or where?
I have lived in this house since 1956. I came out, I graduated in 52. I was in service to 54. I had GI Bill and got married while I was in service. And Lucy was teaching school, and she encouraged me to go ahead and get my graduate degree. Take my GI Bill to go get a master's degree. So, school year 54-55, I was back at NC State and got a master's degree. I still had GI Bill time left, and one of my professors encouraged me to go for a PhD degree in agricultural economics, and that didn't particularly interest me. I told him I believe I'd get out and, I maybe come back, but I'd get out and I'd go try something else. My high school agriculture teacher, I thought he was kind of special. He took an interest in me, and he was wanted taking me to Raleigh on one time to see the college and so forth. And so in school I had studied agricultural education, which was to become an agriculture teacher. By this time, my former teacher in Taylorsville had become a supervisor for Western North Carolina agriculture teachers, and he told me that there was an opening here in Hudson. He gave me a little bit of warning. He said, I think they want somebody with experience, and you're straight out of college, but you can go by and apply. The job's open. So I came and applied for the job, and Lucy came with me. She was teaching down in the little town of Zebulon, which is just beyond Raleigh. It's close enough I could commute into Raleigh. And so we were both hired here. And the first year we rented a house over just beyond where the hub is now. And we were in school there. And at the end of that year, we bought this house. And so the truth is that with the exception of a little bit of, well, of course, my 4 years of work in college, and during the summer, I worked at a sawmill both after high school and after my freshman year in college, and a few little jobs like that. But really, my years of employment have been right here in Hudson. I taught agriculture at Hudson High School from 55 to 77. In 77, they formed South Caldwell. And I went to South Caldwell and taught South Caldwell until 88. And I got into administration for 5 years and retired in 93. So I haven't gone. Now, let me say again something you're not asking me about, but my wife likes to travel. And I enjoy traveling. So while I stayed right here in Hudson, we've been to Europe on probably at least 5 tours. We went on a 3-week tour through Central Europe. We did a week in Ireland. We did a week in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. We've been in China twice. We've been in Nepal. Hong Kong. We did mission work in Mexico. We went on a 2-week church mission to I'm going to give you the name of the town. He'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, we also did a 2-week mission, building mission. This was in the summer times and so forth. And then after I retired, we were in Guatemala 2 weeks. We've done a Mediterranean cruise in which we were in Rome and Naples and Pompeii, the city that was covered with a volcano that they dug out. You've heard of Pompeii. Okay, we toured the reconstruction part that they got it from visitors in Pompeii. We were in Turkey. We went to the again the reconstructed city of in the Bible of Ephesus. We visited there. So while I say our employment's been here, but we have spent a lot of time traveling now. I'll tell you a little bit more on this too. One of our early trips, my wife was librarian at East Harbor, and I was teaching, and we were signed up for a trip, a tour, and she was telling some of the other teachers about it. And this other teacher said, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that." And my wife knew that this lady was driving a new vehicle she had just recently bought. And so Lucy said to her, "Well, there goes my new car." You know, it's how you decide to spend your money. And so we haven't spent a lot of money on new cars, but we have enjoyed traveling.
And you said she liked writing too.
She likes writing. She does, and she. Looking around, she for a good long while enjoyed painting, and then she got quite a few pictures of the house that she has painted. The fact that she painted that.
She painted of her father.
Of her father.
She painted that. Wow.
She's got. Well, actually, I could take you back here and show you some of her paintings, but if that's what you want to see.
If you'd like, sure.
She enjoys painting. No, we'll skip that for right now anyway.
And what were the names of all your children?
I had 2 sons. The oldest one was Carl Benjamin Jr., and we called him Ben. And the second one was David Tig Wagner. Tig was my mother's name, so we gave him the middle name of my mother's name. And Ben is never married, and he's back living with us right now and not working. David lives just a mile over here in Sawmills, and he and another fellow together own the Xerox copier business in Hickory. They cover about 11 counties that they lease. Xerox leases rather than sells equipment. And so they set up leases with Xerox copiers with the college, with business, with churches, with wherever.
And you only had 2 children?
They've got 2 children. They say this was a Christmas present. This is the granddaughter, and she and her husband gave that for Christmas, and this was her wedding. She finished Western Carolina in physical therapy, and she is a physical therapist in Morgantown, West Virginia. And I tell her I know a lot of folks from West Virginia who came to North Carolina to work, but she's the only person I ever knew that went from North Carolina to West Virginia to work. Generally, West Virginia is a place where folks have low unemployment, high unemployment, and are moving out. But the reason she's in Morgantown is that her husband is in a graduate PhD program there. So he's at the University of West Virginia getting his doctorate degree, and she's a physical therapist. The brother doesn't make near the money she does, but he maybe enjoys himself more. He works at a animal conservatory down below Greensboro, Mebane. They have lions and tigers and panthers and wolves, and then they've got smaller animals. They've got New Zealand singing dogs. They've got foxes, bobcats, lynx, lemurs, all grades of animals. And he works there. In fact, he and his wife basically run the place. There's a man and his wife who own the place, but they have a lot of interns and volunteers that come in from just local interest volunteers, but also NC State wildlife interns and so forth that work there. That's how he got started there. He took wildlife at NC State, so he's working down there. But that's my grandson, and this is my granddaughter, and they both finished and are out and married.
Well, so do you have any, can you tell any of experiences you had with them? Like good memories or bad memories?
I can tell you one. My wife retired a couple of years before I did, and the kids were in middle school or elementary school, maybe elementary to middle school, and so every Wednesday she would make a special occasion, figure something she's going to do with the grandkids. She'd pick up the grandkids from school and they'd stay here. And their mother was a teacher, is a teacher at Baton, and she says this is her last year. She's going to retire. But on one occasion, the grandson had gone to a summer program at Caldwell Community College in anatomy and dissection. And they had gone in and dissected a little baby pig or something, a little fetal pig. And he'd done this sort of thing, so he thought he'd sort of enjoyed that. So I said to myself, okay, one Wednesday we will kill a chicken and process it for food. But I didn't have a chicken. We had a local radio program called Swap Shop that was in Lenore at that time, and folks would call in. So I listened around for somebody who had some chickens they wanted to sell, get rid of, but I didn't come up with one. And so I called in and said I'd like to buy a chicken or two. And phone rang, and this fellow said, I got a couple I'll give you. I'm tired of these chickens. You come get them, you can have them. So I went back over on College Springs Road, and he had I said a little red hen. She wasn't a great big hen, but she was a nice size laying hen. And a big, what I call a barred rock rooster. You know what a barred rock is?
Yeah.
It's the feathers have a black stripe and a white stripe vertically across it, like bars. folks call them Domineckers.
Yeah.
You're more familiar with that, okay? So he had them in a pen there, and he was just a little bit afraid of them. He said, I'm going to go down and catch them. He says, you better take a stick. I said, I don't need a stick. I made a grab at and the rooster ran to the wire and tried to stick his neck through the wire, and I grabbed his legs and put him in my sack. Got the hen, brought him home, put him in a cardboard box, had him in the basement. Didn't tell the kids I had them. So they came in, and I said, you know, after they got, of course, they always got chocolate milk, whatever, you know, after school, and I said, now, we got something for you in the basement. Went down there and raised up top of this cardboard box, and he looked in there and he says, a turkey. I said, no, it's a big rooster, it's not a turkey. So we went down back there, and I had a block of wood and I had an axe, and we chopped the head off. And of course, when you chop the head off of a chicken, they don't die immediately. They flop and flutter and jump, and he thought that was great. She wasn't so sure she enjoyed that, and of course, when I was growing up, we always scalded the chicken. That is, we dipped them in hot water so that it loosened the feathers, and we picked the feathers off. And so the chicken came out looking like one you'd see in a grocery store that you buy with the skin still on it. But we have gotten to the place that, of course, the chicken skins have an awful lot of fat in them, and so if we buy a chicken, we skin it. We don't. So I decided I wasn't going to pick these chickens. I was going to skin them with the feathers and skin them out. So I did, and we skinned them out. And when we got into the little hen, she had some eggs formed, some egg yolks and so forth that you could see. You could talk anatomy. And my granddaughter, said, can I have one of those feathers? Sure, have all the feathers you want. Well, she got one of the little red hen's feathers. And I had no idea what she was going to do with it, but she took it with her to school the next day. And she showed it to her teacher. And it turns out that her teacher's husband ties flies for trout flies. And they quite often use what they call the hackle feathers, the feathers around the head and so forth, to make trout fly ties with. And she said, you know, she'd like to have the rest of it. But I had already disposed of it. I had retired by that time, and Gateway School, the alternate school for high school students, had just started, and Herb Stevens was principal down there. Herb Stevens had been principal at High Brighton, and Herb had gotten in trouble over at High Brighton because one day in broad daylight, outside the windows there was a fox, and this fox didn't leave. It was definitely acting funny. The fox that should have been hid in the daytime. And Herb found a shovel, and he went out and battered that fox and killed it. And some individuals thought that this was cruelty. And he got a lot of letters to the editor and criticism about how he beat this poor fox to death out there on the school campus. And I thought he did the right thing myself. But anyway, he was down there. And I had agreed the next day that I would go down and do a small engines class. I taught engine repair for lawnmowers and so forth, and I'd do a small engine class for a few days down there. So I had these two chicken skins in a plastic bag, and they had a school dumpster down there, and I said, I'll just throw them in the school dumpster. Now, this was just before Halloween, and it occurred to me, and when I threw them in the dumpster, I was hoping it's going to be full of all the trash in there and it just blend in, but the dumpster had just been emptied, so I threw it in an empty dumpster. And I went in and I told her, I said, you know, Halloween's coming up, and I just threw 2 chicken carcass remains, feathers and skin, in the dumpster. If somebody thinks that a cult, has got, I'll take the credit for it. Those are my chickens that I threw in there. But nothing ever came of it. I told him that, and of course, other trash got dumped in, and it got dumped, and it was gone. But Lauren came back wanting that rest of those feathers for a teacher, and I said no. I'd already taken them down Dudley's shoulder and thrown them in the dumpster, and I wasn't going to go looking for them. They were gone. But that's one thing that we did with these kids. We've one son. Well, the last big event we did with these kids, when my grandson was a sophomore in college and my granddaughter was a senior in South Caldwell. And Lucy and I were both retired, and we decided that we were going to do a full family cruise. And so we booked a cruise out of Charleston, South Carolina, going into the Bahamas over Christmas when they were out. So we took both of my sons, my daughter-in-law, my 2 grandsons, and we did a cruise together, and we thoroughly enjoyed that. We went to various Caribbean areas, Belize and Honduras and Mexico and some of the islands, and therefore they were Christmas and back into Charleston.
Were your children college bound like you were? Were your children college bound like you were?
I don't quite understand. Were my children
college bound?
Oh,
like you were.
They went through college. I said many times in teaching class to my students and otherwise that I would much rather give a child a strong desire to go to college than to give them the money to go to college. Turns out I gave my kids money to go to college, but maybe not as strong a desire. But they both finished college, yes.
And how old are they now?
54 and 56.
And where are they now?
Let's say one of them is living with us, and the other one is living in Sawmills.
Okay. And what were your experiences with your wife when they left? Like some things that you and your wife did together?
We've done lots of things together. We remodeled this house together many times. Show you 2 pictures. This is the house, that tree, I lost it a few years ago, but this is the house we're living in. This is the house we bought. It's the same house.
How long was this when you took this picture?
I took this picture shortly after we bought it. When I was in service, I had bought a German camera, 35 millimeter, that took slides, and slides were the way to go at that time. But of course, then slides you showed with the projector and so forth. So I had taken this one with a slide. Many years later, I was looking at some old slides and I realized I had this thing, and I said, hey. So I went out to just about the same position and took a picture. And I took this slide somewhere so I could convert it to a regular picture. And this, okay, we did the first major remodeling in 64, 65. They started a bricklaying class at Hudson High School. And the bricklaying instructor told me, said, we're gonna brick your house. And I said, I don't you know, this was, every kid in there was a first year bricklayer. You didn't have any second or third year bricklayers. We're gonna brick your house. And I put it off and kept stalling him until about Christmas. And he kept saying they're going to brick my house, and I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and buy the brick. And you'll start on the back because that's the low point. And I'll look at it and I'll say, it looks pretty good, you keep on laying brick, or it doesn't look so good and I'm going to hire somebody else to finish up. He said, okay. So they started, and I looked, and some things I liked and some things I didn't. And he said, well, anything you don't like, tear it out and we'll put it back in. So the bricklaying class bricked the house. I got to the place where I told him, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let the boys lay the back and the ends, but I'm going to hire somebody to lay the front. And that sort of hurt his feelings. He said, well, so I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, you let the boys lay that, and he said, I'll lay the front myself on Saturdays. You help me with it. So the instructor laid the front, and the boys laid the front, the back, and the sides, and I blew it. They were asking me for projects I'd done with you or things I'd done with you, and I told them we'd remodel this house 5 or 6 times.
All the walls have zippers.
When we bought this house, as you can see, this was built as a den. This is the stair to the basement, but we didn't have a basement. There was no basement under the house. There was a door through here that went into the kitchen area. There was no closet in this room. The bedroom back of it had 2 closets. So I cut the door on this side and closed the door on the other side and made this into one of the boys' rooms. And there was no stairs still there. And they say we've gone through. We moved when we bricked it.
Well, you can see from the front there's an end, a little porch out there.
I've shown them the pictures.
I'm saying there's a little porch. We moved the front wall out.
There was, well, in order to meet code, there had to be a back door, and there was a little door and steps down out the back. And we eventually tore that off and built a basement fireplace and a upstairs fireplace. We had a basement dug under the house with us living in it. But now, in addition to house remodeling, things that you and I have done together, as I told you, we've done a lot of traveling together. She wasn't real keen on it, but I decided she needed to know how to go camping. I had camped in service a lot of times, sleeping out in the snow in a tent. And so we started out with a little homemade camp trailer, and we did some camping, and she definitely wasn't going to sleep on the ground. gotta get her up in the camper. But we later built I built a camper. You've seen a Starcraft camper that has a top that winds up and has camera stuff. Okay, I built one of those. I copied it basically. And we took it to the World's Fair in New York in '65. We took it to Canada. Well, we took it to the West Coast in '69. We spent
and then 2 years later we
3
went
weeks
to Canada.
better. We made a big tour south and up through, and went into Juarez, and then up in the
That's the California trip. Yeah.
California. Went up to Mount Rushmore, and we caught the Carlsbad Cavern on the way out. We went to Grand Canyon. We had the kids with us. 2 years later, we headed north with this camper. We went up through Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, Hershey's, all of the chocolate factories, horse racing. We went on into Valley Forge, where the Washington and the troops spent the winter. We went to Pennsylvania for the Liberty Bell. We went on in through New York, into New England, and into Canada. We got into Nova Scotia, and we followed the St. Lawrence Seaway back to Detroit through Canada with the camper, and then we came from Detroit back down through Kentucky and so forth and back in. We camped all summer. Another summer we took it to Cape Canaveral, and we watched the space shot and made a couple of days and detoured over to Disneyland and Disney World. Disneyland, we'd seen the first trip in California. And then we saw Disney World down in Florida. So we camped together a lot, and we kept that camper till the boys went off to college. After the boys went off to college and it sat a while, I sold it.
We also had a ski boat, and the boys skied. I never did get up to well.
I bought a ski boat. My brother, who was an engineer, got into the Civil Air Patrol, and he was interested in flying, and he suggested that he and I buy a plane together, and wanted little single engine private planes. And he's in Raleigh and I'm up here, and he's gonna keep that plane. But I agreed. He had his eye on one. He just wanted to buy, but he wanted some help in financing that thing. And I agreed we'd do it. But just about that time, this was in the early '70s, and the gas shortage. You were in lines. You may sit in line for an hour to get the gas pump to fill up your car. And if you couldn't get gas for your car, you sure didn't need an airplane, so he didn't buy it. So with that sort of in line, we were looking around, and our boys were getting to the place where we needed to get them involved in some other activities, and so I proposed we buy a ski boat. I say I had done snow skiing in Japan, and so I found a guy that had a boat he wanted to sell. It was practically new.
It really was. It was a nice boat.
It was a nice boat, and so we kept a boat for 4 summers at least.
I think we still had it after David went to college.
Probably sold it after David went to college, but we kept a boat, and we would ski down on Lake Rodius Lake, primarily go down to Sawmills Waterworks, the road.
But we took it other little places around, other publics around.
Well, we took it to White Lake.
Took it to White Lake. That's true. The boys love that.
The FFA, as a Natural Agriculture, we had a club called the Future Farmers of America, FFA. Did either of you go to West or South Caldwell before you went? You went straight into.
Yeah, we went straight into the early college.
Went straight to early college. Okay. The FFA has a camp down in eastern North Carolina called White Lake. That's on a big lake.
On White Lake.
That's on White Lake. It's called the FFA camp on White Lake. And so, a lot of summers I'd take a group of boys and our family, and we would go and spend a week down there, and I'd take the boat and we'd ski on the lake and so forth. So, as far as what she and I have done together, most of what I did, she was involved in.
I had a PhD in holding.
No,
I could hold.
She says that. No, she doesn't have a PhD in holding. She's too impatient. She'll hold for the first 5 minutes, but then she's gone.
Got something else to do. But we've traveled. We've had good times with the boys and the trips we've made. And
I've told them about our trips. Yep.
Yeah.
But our question was, what have we done together? And I said, we've remodeled house, we've camped, we've traveled, Yep.
And we've done a lot of church work together.
Yep.
Both of us. We've
And
worked in our
Habitat.
church
We've done Habitat.
consistently over the years. Yeah.
Have you felt like you raised your children right?
As best I could. You always wish for things that didn't happen, but as best I could.
Mm.
Yep.
We had an Eagle Scout. He was Scoutmaster.
Yep.
We worked as scouts.
Yep.
He had an Eagle Scout.
Yep.
And when did you become a commissioner?
What, called me to be town commissioner?
Yeah.
When? I thought you said.
Yeah.
When?
When?
Oh, in '89.
29. And what made you want to be one?
That was when the town was in trouble.
Well, let me. She's recording you up here, Lucy.
Okay. Where do we work?
The town has a board of commissioners, and they have a planning board. The planning board is appointed; it's not elected. And the planning board works with zoning and planning and so forth. And I had been asked to be on the planning board, and had worked with the planning board for a number of years. And then the town went through a financial crisis in which the town was broke. The town manager just didn't go to work one morning. He left town. Just gone. And they didn't have enough money really to meet payrolls. And election was coming up. And there are 6 commissioners, 3 elected, each elected for 4 years, but they're staggered terms. 3 elected this 2 years, and then 3 elected next 2 years. And the 3 who were going to be up for election that year, they didn't run. And I didn't run either. But a couple of friends of mine did. One of them ran for mayor and the other one on the board. And after 2 years of hard digging and raising water bill like crazy and other things to get money coming in, the mayor, he was a school teacher. He went to church with me. Our kids had played together. We were good friends. And I was encouraging him to run for mayor. And again, he'd served 2 years, and he ought to serve another 2 years. And he didn't necessarily agree to. And so I told him, I said, at this point, nobody had filed for commissioner. And I said, you run for mayor and I'll file for commissioner. So he didn't agree to that right then, but on Friday, the last day to file, he called me and he said, I'm up here filing for mayor. You come on up and file for commissioner. So I did. Turns out there were 3 seats, and I was the only one that filed for one of the 3 seats. The other 2 did not get filed for. The town was in that bad a shape. And so the Board of Election opened the filing for another 2 weeks. The filing was supposed to close on this Friday, but they extended it for 2 weeks more to try to get it. And so a couple other individuals did file, and we ended up 3 individuals. Nobody with any opposition, but the 3 filled the seat, and we went from there.
Did you tell her about what you've done with the community development in the town?
Nope.
No. He's worked very hard for the town.
We're going to let these folks go home
That's
sometime.
true. We got to have supper too. But he was, well, were you a commissioner when they started Redwood Park? I don't think so. I think it was
I was
before.
not commissioner when we started the park.
No, but we worked on the park, raised funds for the park. We did that together.
Right.
We worked on. I managed the town parade for 17 years, and he helped me there. We did a lot of things with the town. We have worked hard with the town, both of us. We've been on the committee to get the caboose, and we've been on the museum committee. So we've worked hard on in the town.
And what message do you really want to get out there, especially for teenagers now?
I would sum it up into the statement that these are not the toughest of times, and they will get better.
And what do you value most about yourself?
That's a hard question, depending on what facet you look at. Of course, I value my family, but I think you're asking me what characteristic do I value?
It could be about anything.
I value my family, my reputation.
Okay. If there's anything else you'd like to talk about, you can do it now. Or
You've been most gracious.
Thank you.
You'll have enough for a report.
Yes.
More than.
You can edit. And a good reporter edits. Right? Oh.
If I can ask a question, where did you get your accent?
My accent? I have an accent? I didn't know I had one. Well, I'm Hispanic, so.
Right.
Yes.
And have you lived most of your life in the United States, or?
Yes. For 11 years.
11 years.
11 years. 11
It
years.
isn't bad. It's pretty. It's very pretty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it is there. Now, don't feel bad about it. I ate lunch today with somebody who came from Italy when she was 6 years old, and she's now 73. She says, I don't have an accent. She does. She does. You know, but she does. I'm saying that, you know, it comes with us.
Yeah.
I'm going to take my quick tour of your art gallery.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Right here, I'll show you this one since we talked. This is the house that my grandfather built and that I was raised in. My sister still lives in. This is the big barn that me and my dad built when I was in junior and senior in high school. This is an aerial shot of the farm, and of course we got farmland that goes this way too, but that's what that is. This is a clock that my grandfather, I get my dates right. My grandfather went. My great grandfather went before the Civil War and bought it secondhand from a neighbor. And it's been in the family ever since about 1860. Like he's supposed to wind it.
Wow. How long have you had that clock?
I've had it in my possession since, I guess since my mother died in She was 90. My mother died in 88.
Yeah.
88. Of course, it came through my father. His father and his grandfather had that clock.
Now that picture there, I did not paint. My grandmother painted that. She died in 1904. So it's
long as I'm showing you.
Oh, Daddy.
Nope, I'm gonna show you. These right here.
We live in our house, as you can tell.
When I was in Japan, one of the things I brought home. See, this is cloth. These are stitches. This is artwork done with needlework.
Wow. Really pretty.
The dust is free. We've got several.
And those things there are needlework also that I brought home from Japan. We'll leave that down and dust a little before it goes back.
Yeah, Beaver, do you need to?
Starting back through this way. Of course, these are some things I brought back from Japan.
The red thing, the red faces, not the green ones, not the green ones. He brought back nice things from Japan. Okay. When we remodeled the house, if you will look, the bathroom is there and the door is there. We had a little girl next door. It was always there. There.
When we bought the house, there was no hallway here, the front porch, so we pushed the house that way into the front porch and put a hallway down through here and closed up that. So this hallway was not here. But anyway.
You don't see very many of my pictures out there. Those are photographs. Go on. You can head through. Come on around. Either way. Either way. It goes in a circle.
These are various things we picked up from our travel. Different places, different things. Eskimo.
I live in Alaska.
I bought that in Japan. That's a frog carved out of a piece of cedar wood that I brought home from Japan. But various things from different places we traveled. That's whalebone.
That's from Japan.
Whalebone from Japan.
It's lost some of its little lanterns. It used to have 4 lanterns. And it had another pole.
These are, again, some pictures that I brought back from Japan. These are some of my wife's paintings.
That's pastel.
Ma'am?
Pastel. Not painting. Chalk.
These over here, she did.
Yeah. With a lot of help.
Who did these finger paintings?
Those were finger painting by men.
But we didn't do them.
We didn't do them.
No, we didn't do those. But I say these are prints I brought back from Japan of needlework. I thought that was right neat stuff.
It is.
And when I say needlework, I'm sure, you see, this they didn't start just with a plain piece of cloth. There was some sort of background that was woven into it, and then they added to it, I'm sure.
I did these tulips.
You did those?
Mm-hmm.
That looks really pretty.
As long as I'm showing and bragging.
Yeah, you made that table.
I built the table.
Wow, that looks really good.
I built the chest box.
Yes. I arranged for most of the chess pieces. That was going to be a Father's Day gift, and I got all this.
She helped the kids
do that for
when they were
Scouts.
little. As long as we're talking and showing off. This right here. That says Monte Carlo. Does Monte Carlo mean anything to you?
It's a little state in between Italy.
Monte Carlo is a famous gambling casino in
yes.
southern France.
And they got the races.
It's actually a country, a little principality. My father in World War I, after the war ended, he stayed on as 6 months as occupation troops in in Europe, and he bought these boxes in Monte Carlo and made out of olive wood. And that box and this picture album, and that's my father and that's my mother and some of the pictures there and so forth. But this he brought back from World War I and was a picture album that he bought in Monte Carlo.
We lost the cover. I mean, that was lost where I got it.
We started out, we were going to show pictures. She doesn't want to see the coffee pot that my great-grandfather took around.
That's a joke.
A real quickie. This coffee pot, little. Lucy and I like to go to auctions, houses, estate auctions and so forth. And one day we were going through Lenore and didn't plan to go to an auction, but certainly we were at an auction on the side of the road, and we stopped. And we watched a few things sale, and that coffee pot and a platter came up for sale. And it wasn't getting much bidding on it. And so I bid a few dollars, and somebody else raised it a little bit, and I thought, well, I'll go $25 on it. I kept going up. Well, I got 25. Somebody else bid 26. I bid 27. About $29 I bought it. And this was way back yonder. And we brought it home and tried to polish it. It was silver plate on pewter, and the silver plate was pitted, and the more you polished, the more the bad places showed,
Yeah.
And
we put it back over the shelf.
So,
5 years or so.
Well, we took it to a jeweler place about replating, and he said, you can't afford to replate that thing, So we put it in the back of a closet, way back on the top shelf, and forgot it. We remodeled this house and pushed this out, and we did that in '65. So we bought this thing probably in the late '50s, and Lucy said we need something to go on the mantle. I said, how about the coffee pot that my great-great-grandfather took in a clipper ship around the Horn on his trip to China? She says, what? I says, we've got the coffee pot that my great-great-grandfather took around the clipper ship. He's sailing, trading with China.
The one he got.
She says, no. I said, I'll show it to you. I went back to the closet. I got this thing out that I bought in an auction. So we put it up there, and that, if anybody asked, that was my great-grandfather on a sailing ship. Now, the truth is, we bought it in an auction in Lenore. I don't know where it came from, but anyway. That was that. This my son Ben. Lucy did the painting over there over the table. That was the younger boy when he was with his hobby horse and so forth. She did this. This was the older boy putting up hay with my grandmother, my mother, and my daddy. She did that one. She did the house that she was raised in Florida.
Once a Marine, always a Marine. And a decorated veteran who received the Purple Heart for Valor during World War II.
I've had a hobby of woodworking, and I built the entertainment center there. I built this chairside hutch here. I built the mantle up there. I built the clock on the mantle. Fortunately, one of the reasons I went into agriculture teaching was they had a shop. You see,
he liked the shop.
In high school, they had a shop. And I liked shop. One more, and we're going to let you go. We're going to open this door right here.
And we're not going to go down.
Not going to go down. They'd be beasties down there. But this is Lucy's paintings.
Wow. You're a really good artist. You're a really good artist.
Thank you. I quit when I ran out of places to put things.
And did you draw that White House right there in the middle?
That was I did that. That's the house I was born in Florida.
In Florida. Wow.
Yeah.
And what's your name?
Lucy.
Lucy.
Huh?
Lucy. Okay.
Lucy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good to see you, girls.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
got everything you need?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'll put those back up.
Since you talked about it. And would you like to take a picture?
Let me get my camera.
Okay.
You're Vanessa and you're
Keelan.
Kean?
Keelan. Yeah.
Okay, Keelan. Let's see what I can do here. Okay, ready? Okay.
Here, I'll take one of you too.
I wasn't sure what I saw was an emblem from down the bottom. Looked like a trash can.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll show you this one I got real quick.
Oh, and just to let you know, we will provide you a copy of the edited auto recording and a written biography.
There you are.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, would you like me to email you that picture?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. I'll let you email it to yourself here in a little bit.
Okay.
Let's do this. That's first of all, I haven't copied it. I got to copy it onto the. Let's copy that thing in. View, organize, copy. This is pictures of a train bell that we just got for a museum up here in Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
Right here you are. Okay, we're going to copy this one.